What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another one of my movie reviews. Today we are talking about The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, an absolute mouthful of a title. So this movie is the prequel following the events of young Coriolanus Snow. What a confusing name, first of all. Before we get into the review, I'm just giving you guys a spoiler warning. I will be talking about certain details, so I'm expecting you guys have seen it and then come back and then we can talk about this thoroughly. So just to preface this, I have not read this book. I've read the original Hunger Games series way long ago, but nonetheless, I'm looking at this movie purely based on what I saw on screen. And speaking of which, because the original Hunger Games came out a decade ago, it leads the question to what was the whole point of making a prequel so many years later? Well, the movie does answer that a little bit. Instead of focusing much on the point of view of the districts, it focuses on the point of view from the capital. Snow is someone who is kind of born in the capital and has grown up in the capital, so his perspective on life is completely different than those in the districts. It also explores how the Hunger Games kind of became a spectacle, because the story follows the 10th Hunger Games. So everything before that was not televised, and this was the first time that it became televised and became this national sensation in Panem. We also explore aspects of how the mentor became a very, very important part of the Hunger Games. It's not just the games itself. In fact, it's the games, and then it's the games within the games, but then it's also the games outside of the games. How the Capitol is realizing that the Hunger Games can really be this produced, televised reality TV series. So not only is it important for the tributes to play a good survival game, it's also important for them to play a good social game, to be a good character for the audience to watch. And also, it's very interesting in this movie that it shows that the mentors' roles and the people outside of the games itself is also very much playing a game. And we see in this movie, Snow pretty much is the one playing the games and not even Lucy Gray. It's also interesting to see how the tributes this time around are treated as animals and savages, and they were literally put behind cages in a zoo for the people in the capital to come and see them. But in Katniss's world of the Hunger Games, the tributes were seen as these celebrities and this cast of people instead of just lowly district people. And we didn't really see all of the strategies come into play this time around, such as how does the fashion influence the popularity of these contestants? How does their background really influence their survival chances? We don't really talk all about that. In fact, the Hunger Games itself is very much the back burner of this movie. Another thing I wanted to point out is, what is the meaning of the Ballad of Songbird and Snakes? So there's a few interpretations that I came up with. First of all, obviously, Ballad of the Songbird, very much Lucy Gray is the songbird. We even literally get characters saying, "Oh, Lucy Gray is your songbird," and Lucy was literally singing pretty much the whole movie. So there's a literal interpretation right there. My second interpretation is that Lucy Gray is not only just the songbird, but she's also the snake. We see Lucy Gray immediately off the bat use snakes to her advantage to bite the mayor's daughter. We also see it at the end when she uses a snake as a trap to bite Snow. And of course, while she was in the games itself, she was able to avoid death from the snakes because of what Snow did. And she's a snake kind of because she essentially backstabs Snow when all Snow wanted to do was help her. So Lucy isn't all that innocent, right? She is a little bit of a selfish character as well, but I believe she did it mostly out of survival and her gut instinct, because Snow by the end was pretty ruthless, just killing people left and right, so she made the right decision in the end. And my third interpretation of what the songbird and snakes means is Lucy is still the songbird, but Snow is the snake, and it shows how these two opposing forces will never truly be able to coexist. They are completely different people from different worlds. One is from the capital, one's from the districts. They will never get along. Now let's talk a little bit about the Hunger Games itself. So this time around, the Hunger Games is still very primitive. It's still held in a literal coliseum. There's not as much advanced technology going into these games. It's more so literally, let's see who can hit each other the fastest, who can stab each other the fastest, who can run away and hide and bide their time. It was interesting to see it like this. However, my take is that I actually think they could have spent less time with the Hunger Games. I know the Hunger Games is in the title. That should be a big part of the movie, right? However, the focal point of the movie is why Snow became the way he is and his relationship with Lucy Gray, and we never even spent any time with the rest of the tributes in the Hunger Games. No one was really likable. They all just kind of died, and we all knew Lucy was going to win, so the stakes of the Hunger Games was much less impactful. So we honestly could have just skipped maybe 15 minutes of the Hunger Games. There's no twist and turns this time, besides the fact that I guess two of the mentors actually physically stepped into the arena and impacted the results of the Hunger Games. But like I mentioned before, the Hunger Games is very much just as important the game outside of it. So it was really interesting to see the game that Snow is playing, like trying to get Dr. Gall to trust him. It was also interesting to see that he was the one playing the social games. He knew that if Lucy sang, the audience would give them more donations, and then he used the donations as almost a weapon himself, because the drones were very primitive technology and they went haywire and were pretty destructive themselves. So he was able to use that to his advantage and save Lucy in the games. But again, everything else we could have focused a little less on. We also got to see the capital itself a lot more this time around. However, maybe I'm greedy, but I wish we got to see more of the capital. That was the most interesting part. It was cool to see that in the capital, it almost looks like modern day, but it has this retro futuristic aesthetic that I really like. It's almost like steampunk, but not all the way there. It's very unique aesthetic to the Hunger Games. But yeah, because they didn't focus that much on the rest of the capital and the areas that we could explore, it just felt very small and limited to that one building that we got to see, which I'm assuming is the equivalent of either the university or like the White House or something like that. All right, now let's talk about the characters themselves. Let's start with Coriolanus Snow, played by Tom Blyth. Right off the bat, let's talk a little bit about his look. First of all, I loved all of the school uniforms, the red ones with the suit and the skirt. I thought that was super cool, super modern. I liked it much more than the gray outfits they had in the rest of the movie as peacekeepers. But the whole time I was like, he kind of looks like Draco Malfoy, right? I'm not the only one that saw it. Also, his hair in the beginning when it was longer, my God, was that a bad wig? I mean, the whole time I was just like, that looks so much like a Party City wig that it was a little distracting. And then when he shaved his head, I was like, he ate that. He ate that. And then at the end, when his hair kind of grew back longer and it was very in this preppy hairstyle, I was like, he looks really good. Very charismatic on screen, very enjoyable to watch, and he did a very good job as the lead character and carrying the movie on his shoulders. I've never seen him in anything, but he's a good actor. Also, it is interesting to see the origins of this big bad villain that we eventually get to know as President Snow. We see how he's not just born a psychopath, right? Although, do I really think it was explored to its entirety in this movie? I don't know. It's almost implied just because of this betrayal from Lucy Gray and this heartbreak. He ultimately goes down this horrific path of evil and violence. A bit of a drama queen, if I do say so myself. So I just have to assume that between the heartbreak and the events of Katniss, he did a lot more bad things to become as evil as he was. But in the end, he is the product of his environment and his culture. He was always from the capital, so that's the values that he gets. And when he was talking to Lucy, he was like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the capital eventually. I'm not going to be able to run away with you to the middle of nowhere. The capital is my home at the end of the day. Plus, he views the people of the districts as savages, so that's just how you know the capital has kind of brainwashed him. Also, it was interesting to see how he killed people out of necessity in the beginning for survival, but then by the end, he just kills Peter Dinklage purely as a power move and to kind of save himself from getting exposed by Peter Dinklage eventually. But the biggest thing that came out of that is he learns that everyone just uses each other for their own gain. Also, the most interesting part to me was how the Hunger Games might have just ended that year if it weren't for the involvement of Snow. At first, he cared so much about having Lucy Gray survive purely because he had an affection towards her, but then in the end, because of that, it resulted in the Hunger Games being more popular, and so then they were able to continue filming it each year, and it's ultimately because of him that the Hunger Games continued, which is really interesting because if he didn't get involved, maybe Dr. Gall would have killed everyone in the Hunger Games, and then the public really wouldn't watch the Hunger Games, and then none of the Katniss stuff would have happened. Really interesting to think about. And speaking of Lucy Gray, let's talk about Rachel Zegler as Lucy Gray. Listen, she wasn't as bad as I thought she would be. That being said, she also wasn't that good. I don't want to compare her to Katniss, but this is what I will say. There's obviously some kind of reflection between her and Katniss's character, right? Because she's the songbird, Katniss is the mockingjay. They're both kind of symbols of the rebellion, but the execution wasn't there. Our first introduction to Lucy Gray was that she's this rebellious type. She's a little bit mischievous. She had that snake on her, which she put down the shirt of the mayor's daughter. And then she got punched right in the face by the mayor, and then she kind of just took it like a champ. So my first impression of her was she was going to be this badass, right? But then as we continue into the games, and then we realize that Snow is really the one who was playing the games, she just kind of came off as this fragile, weak girl instead of being this victor. She just does not have that stage presence, that camera presence that Katniss did when portraying this symbol of rebellion. And I think Rachel Zegler has such a talented voice. That girl can really sing, okay? However, I did not anticipate the whole movie almost all of her lines was singing. It got to the point where it was like, oh, another song? Really? I do think, though, this might mean she could be good in Snow White. However, there's a lot of drama going on in Snow White Land, which I don't even know if that movie is going to come out with her in it because she might have been fired. Anyways, different story, different day. Also, I don't think Rachel Zegler is a very good, nuanced actor. I think a lot of her facial expressions were very theater-like, and by that I mean it probably looks better on stage than on camera, because a lot of the times her face doesn't exactly say what her emotions are feeling. There's some kind of disconnect there. I don't know if you guys noticed that too. I did like her speech about how everyone is born good and you just have to cross that line to becoming evil, and that's exactly what happened to Snow. And the big question at the end of the movie, of course, is what happened to Lucy Gray? And I think Suzanne Collins and everyone wants to leave it ambiguous on purpose. I mean, I hope she survived. I hope she gets to live her life in the woods, free from the capital, but I guess we'll never know. All right, let's talk about some of the other standout actors, specifically Viola Davis as Dr. Gall. Perfectly unhinged. See, her portrayal was also a little bit theater because it was so campy and just that close to being too over the top. And speaking of bringing humanity to villains, we really didn't get that with Dr. Gall. She was just straight up evil. But you know, I didn't really care because I really liked Viola Davis like that. I also loved her outfits in the movie. She looked stunning. And a standout moment was when Snow's classmate was like, yeah, I'm the one who wrote that letter, and then she made that girl put her hand in the cage of snakes. That was pretty great. Yes, violence. I love violence. Let's talk about Jason Schwartzman as Flickerman. Thank God for him in the movie, because we really would not have gotten any comedic relief whatsoever. I also can't decide if I like Jason Schwartzman better or Stanley Tucci, but they both do such a good job portraying these characters. Let's talk about Hunter Schafer as Tigress. A much smaller role than I thought she would have, but she killed it. Her outfits were awesome, and I really do wish we got to see more of her, especially because how did she become like a tiger person? What happened to her? And I think it's kind of implied by the end of the movie that she kind of sees the change in Snow and the evil path he's going down. But, you know, I do wish we got to see more. Let's talk about Josh Andres Rivera as Sejanus. God, these names are just so difficult. I thought he did a good job acting, but I hated his character. He was straight up there to drive the plot forward. He was there to cause conflict in the Hunger Games itself, and then he was there to cause conflict within District 12, and then he just died, so okay. And then Peter Dinklage, yeah, he was Peter Dinklage, you know, just what we expect from him at this point. It wasn't anything standout like Viola Davis or anything, but he was there. And finally, let's talk about the pacing of the movie. So the movie was nearly 3 hours long, but honestly, it didn't feel like it to me. I was engaged the whole time, and that might shock some of y'all in the comments thinking, oh, I have such short attention span, but I honestly thought it went by really quickly, and even by the end, I was like, that's it? I think splitting the movie into 3 parts was a really good idea. It helps the audience know, okay, this arc is done, the second arc, and so it really keeps the pace going. Now, I've seen all the internet saying that the third part felt really rushed, and I agree with that. It just felt like incomplete in a way, and I wanted more. The debate on the internet is, should this movie have been split into 2 parts? And I still don't think so, because I think a big draw of these movies is the Hunger Games itself. And if you split this into a second movie, there would be no Hunger Games to draw the audience in. So I do think this was the right choice to keep it as one movie, but we were already almost at 3 hours. Let's just add like another 20 minutes or so at this point. I mean, Oppenheimer gets all that time, so might as well give this movie a bit more runtime. I think we could have paced it a little bit better at the third act. Again, I think if we cut down the time in the second act of the Hunger Games itself, it could have helped. Overall, I'm just trying to say that the movie left me wanting more, even though it was almost 3 hours long. And so that leaves me being like, what now? The events that happened after this movie, we saw it 10 years ago. It finished with Katniss being such a great character. You leave me wanting more of the Hunger Games, but there is no more of the Hunger Games. So I don't know if Suzanne Collins is going to be like the type of person to not want anything touched from her original stuff, but I think it could be a good idea to have more shown from young Snow. I think he's a really great character. I think Tom Blyth is really charismatic on screen. I would totally watch more of his story, especially if we get to see Snow in his adult years and see how his rise to power is and what he's up to and all the shenanigans in between. I think that could be a good idea. My overall rating for this movie is a 7.5 out of 10. I thought it was perfectly okay. I just wanted more, but as an addition to the Hunger Games that I didn't realize I needed, it was serviceable. But what did you guys think? Did you guys want more from this movie, or are you perfectly okay with how it ended up? Either way, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on my future movie reviews. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.